And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Me and Ryan back for another week. We are here to recap episode 9 of Survivor season 43. What's good, Ryan? I really enjoyed this episode. I'm excited to talk about it. Love a double boot, and here we are.
Dylan, great episode. Great to be back with you again. Some people outside are arguing. I tried offering them a papaya, but they didn't want any.
Look, maybe they should have taken it because maybe they would have, calmed down a little. You never know.
I know, right?
But anyway, I'm so excited to get to everything we got in this episode. We had James go home, and then we had Ryan go home in the double boot. I can't say it was the most unpredictable tribal council, each of them, but I would not say it was exactly predictable either. It was a really good, really high quality Survivor episode with a lot of interesting storylines that happened, a lot of interesting alliances that were kind of either blown up or kind of thrown together. And I'm curious to see how that affects the final 8 going forward. One thing that I have been saying, and a lot of people talk when they rate a season about boot order, right? So a lot of people say season 34 Game Changers, that wasn't a great season because people didn't like that all the players that people wanted to see that season all went basically pre-merge or right after it. This season, to me, and I know there are probably going to be people that disagree, I should say, that are watching this right now. In my opinion, I think that most of the best players in this game are still there going into the final 8. And that's why I'm so excited about this season with, coming up here.
Yeah, I think you can, I can agree with that. I mean, people always are very mixed when it comes to boot order because it's all subjective anyway. But yeah, I think it goes back to what we were saying about this being a chaotic season where it's a very even playing field where I feel like whenever you have a season with like your Kim Spradlins, your Boston Robs, your Tonys, you have your clear front runner. And then it comes down to, does that front runner hold on or do they kind of get cut before the end? And even if you look back to last season, you had maybe either Hai or Omer as our front runners and then they got cuts. And this season, I don't think you can say that. I think if you looked at the early game, you would have said like, oh, Jesse's our front runner, or like, no, maybe Carla's our front runner. But, Sammy's really doing pretty good things, and Noelle made some big moves. So I can't say there's a clear front runner, Dylan. And I think that goes to your point where it's saying it's a pretty even field where anybody, minus Gabler, could probably win this game still. And I think that's why you feel like a lot of decent players are at the end where anything can still shake out.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the cast that's left right now, right? I would say probably your top 3 would be, and in no order, I should say the top 3. Carla, Jesse, and then Cody, I would say are probably my top 3. And then I would say, but like right behind Cody, I would say is like Cassidy, Sammy. And then of course, Noelle is playing a really good game, but you have your doubts if she's actually going to get there because are you going to really take Noelle with you to the final 3? I doubt it. So it's just like there's so many contenders that are left. And then Owen has like the underdog story arc, right? So is he going to be able to make a move to kind of get himself further up? We'll have to see. Look, the reality is that this is a really strong final 8, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I think with this episode, people are sometimes split because obviously we have the split tribal council, and I think some people like it, some people really don't like it. I feel like it's a good twist. I mean, I don't want to see it every single season. So I think seeing it 3 times in a row in the same exact spot has kind of been a little bit meh. But that just goes back to the whole thing about the new era and each season being a carbon copy of each other. But I think it was pretty interesting because in my mind, and we'll get more into this as we get to the challenge, when we had the breakdowns, I was like, okay, one group is going to be way more interesting than the other group. And I think I can guess what's going to happen in the second group compared to the first. And I feel like it was almost flipped for me where I feel like in one group that I didn't expect, I kind of knew what was going to happen. In the other group where I thought it was so obvious, it actually wasn't. So I'm excited to break it down in terms of each group individually. And then, as we always do, what was the right move for those players? Was it the right move, etc.?
Yeah. I'm curious to see, as well going forward, like was this the right move for all these different people? And honestly, I think we should really start there, right? It's like that was we could start there and then we could go through, the episode. So the two groups that we had, the first one being Owen, Sammy, Noel, Carla, and James. The second one being Cassidy, Jesse, Gabler, Ryan, and Cody. Carla won immunity from group 1. Cody won immunity from group 2. So, I mean, if you're looking at this right now, right, at least in the middle of the episode when I was looking at it, as soon as Cody won immunity, I was like, oh no, Gabler's in trouble, right? Because he looked like he was going to be clearly on the outs there. And then it ended up not being even in the question for Gabler his name was not even brought up really. And then the other group, once Carla won, I mean, it really looked like Owen was going to be in trouble, but then, you had that 3 of Owen, Sammy, and Noel that you knew could make a move on James. But given the fact that Carla has an idol and James has knowledge is power, before I even saw them go back to camp after the challenge, I had my doubts about them actually being able to pull a move off on James because of that. And then, James ends up going home, but it was not exactly in the way that I don't think anyone expected, right? There was an advantage used and in a completely unconventional way, and we could talk about that. And Sammy, while we originally thought, at least I originally thought, that you would see a 3 of Owen, Sammy, and Noel, it looked like it was a 2 of Owen and Noel, a 2 of Sammy and Carla, and then the 1 of James. So there was a lot going on here, and we could start off with this group 1. What was your original thoughts on voting out James? Was it the right move for everyone involved? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so as I was referring to, this was the group that I had thought was going to be the more interesting one, and in essence, it was. You had a lot of moving parts here when it comes to the original 7 from last week, and then the outsiders, where you have Carla and James and Sammy as part of the 7 that had taken out Dwight and Janine, and then you have Noel and Owen kind of on the bottom. But we know from the last episode, Sammy wants to make a move, and Sammy didn't get his way. I think we see early on in the episode when they get back from Tribal, Sammy wanted to make the move, but he knew the votes weren't there, so he wasn't going to push. He kind of held his boundary there. But Dylan, when I saw how these groups were broken down, I'm like, okay, Carla or James are gone. Like, I knew in a 5-person group, even if you put aside Noelle steal votes, which we'll get into, even if she didn't have the advantage, I just knew Sammy was not going to miss a chance to make a move again in a 5-person small group against James or Carla, because you could argue in the 7, along with Cody and Jesse, they are probably the kingmakers there. They're probably the most powerful ones in that group. So already I was like, well, if James or Carla doesn't win immunity, one of them is going home. And I think if one of them does win it, then the other is gone. So I actually pretty much felt like 15 minutes into the episode, as soon as Carla won, I'm like, James is done, whether or not Noelle uses her steal a vote. Now, I guess if you're asking me, was it the right move? I feel like that's really tricky because I think it comes down to Carla. Because obviously it was the right move for Owen and Noelle, clearly. It was the right move for Sammy, I think, clearly. And it just comes down to, because Carla was in on the plan because Sammy filled her in, was she good to let James go here?
Yeah, I personally think that, it all comes down to knowledge is power, right? Oh. And I think that even though, look, the fact that James had knowledge is power, I think ultimately was what probably pushed Carla to vote him out even more, right? Because, Sammy, first of all, Sammy made a great pitch for it, right? That's one thing that Sammy's done that is incredibly impressive. He's been able to convince people to, go his way, even in a circumstance where it doesn't seem like he's going to make that happen. Mm-hmm. He made a really good pitch, right? That may have been the only time, or maybe the best time, for Carla to vote out James, right? Because it was going to have to happen, right? Because, look, James was kind of gaining power, gaining confidence, right? At the end of the day, if you're in an alliance like that and it's a 2, so let's say James and Carla right here, that they're eventually going to go after each other. You have to be the one to strike first when he's not realizing it. Otherwise, things could go terribly wrong. It could backfire on you. So I think that in the back of Carla's mind, she knew she was going to have to cut off James immediately. And And this could have been the best opportunity to do it when the numbers were really small and in her favor. Also, and as I said before, she gets rid of knowledge is power, which she has an idol, whether people know it or not. If word somehow gets out, if people figure it out, she's completely protected because the knowledge is power is out of the game. So immediately I was like, is this the right move for Carla? It seems like she's kind of just giving in to Sammy. And then I thought about it. And I was like, I think that because Cassidy stayed, it is the right move. However, if Cassidy was voted out, she would have been in trouble. And that's another interesting whole layer. Them going first at the tribal was a huge disadvantage for them.
Well, yeah. And when we get to group 2, we could talk about what Cody and Jesse decided, because that's why I was actually a bit, not confused, but I was a bit blindsided, because the way they were presenting it to us is that because Cody's group went to tribal second, it was presented to us like, okay, because Carla and James have a lot of power, if what's it called? If what was I saying? Oh yeah, if they vote out, the Carla group votes out James, they feel good enough to make a move against Cassidy. However, if Owen goes, because Owen's on the bottom, they'll just take out Ryan just to not cause any waves with Carla and James. So I feel like in the first group, it really did come down to who went first or second. I think that did play into some things. And I think with Carla, I mean, look, the knowledge is power. All I'm going to say is it better not come back a third time. It's 0 for 4 in the new era. It struck out twice this season. Lord help them if they bring it back a third time to try to make knowledge is power work. But yeah, I mean, I think you could make it a clear argument, like you said, Dylan, like because Carla took out Gio because he had the knowledge is power, it would not surprise me that in the back of her mind, she's like, do I go with Sammy? Do I try to save James here? But he has knowledge of power, so maybe I'll just take him out. And he's arguing with Owen, so maybe Carla felt like he could be detrimental to her game. Now, I feel like strategically, and I know it's tough in a 5-person group because it's not the same as if you're playing in a 10-person tribe. If two people are publicly fighting, Dylan, I want to keep them in as long as possible because that turns their attention towards each other and away from me. So I'm wondering if this was a 10-person group and not the split tribal, would James have gone here, or would somebody else besides him or Owen have gone? So I feel like strategically you want to keep 2 people who are fighting because that means that you're off the spotlight a bit longer. And I feel like with Carla, the last thing I'll say is that even though this was presented as like Sammy going to her and Sammy kind of making this move, I feel like Carla's still not in a bad spot because everybody this episode, the theme of the episode, Dylan, was everybody was like, how do I not make Carla upset, or how do I bring Carla into this? Like everybody has Carla's best interest still at heart, though.
I think ultimately, right? Maybe Carla said Sammy is more likely to stay loyal to me longer than James is, right? And maybe she just decided, like, all right, I assume that I'm going to have Cassidy still. I think that she thought there was probably no chance Cassidy was going to go home, even though there was clearly a chance that, right? She probably thought, all right, I'm going to have Cassidy still. Mm-hmm. Sammy looks so loyal to me right now. I'm going to keep him around and just get rid of the knowledge is power and James while I could. Mm-hmm. Because I think ultimately, like, James was going to try to make that move against Carla. Like, the way he was going, I feel like he was snowballing towards that, right? I think ultimately Carla is still in a good spot because she has Sammy, she has Cassidy. They could easily bring in Owen, Noel, Gabler, and they could go against the 2 guys who are potentially running the game right now, depending on how you look at it, in Jesse and Cody. The question is, are they going to be able to vote these guys out with 2 idols? Nobody knows Jesse as an idol, so they could have trouble waiting if they try to strike, and it may not work because of that idol. So I'm curious to see what happens. I think it was the right move for Carla because she still has numbers, and yet she eliminated a potential threat to her game. If that makes sense.
I mean, it sounds like from what Sammy was saying, and obviously we don't see everything, Sammy made it clear to us in confessional that he really because I mean, obviously he could have just left her out of it completely, but he was the one who kind of went to her and said, this is what I'm thinking. And I feel like this kind of is kind of hinting to us like Carla and Sammy are a lot closer than I think the show is letting on. And I think maybe like you were saying, she wanted to work with Sammy more long-term than James anyway. But again, I think that speaks to not only Sammy's social game, but I think also Carla's, because not only is Sammy trying to not leave her out of it. But Jesse and Cody are like, we can't risk voting out Cassidy because that makes Carla look bad, or Carla's in a bad spot, even though they don't know she was also in the plan to vote out James.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, and that kind of leads us into group 2, right? It's like, first of all, Carla's social game is one of the more impressive social games we've seen in a long time. Think about everything that happened in this episode, right? She wins immunity. Everyone goes crazy and is so happy she won.
Mm-hmm.
We get to the vote out, and pretty much Sammy is begging to work with Carla. He's begging to work with her. We know that, and now going to group 2, we know that Jesse and Cody want to work with Carla also, I would say, given the fact that they got rid of Ryan and not Cassidy. Because had they got rid of Cassidy, you're pretty much, drawing a line in the sand and saying, we want to go against Carla now. Because James got voted out, and now you're taking out Cassidy. So Carla would have been completely on her own. So you draw your line in the sand. They did not do that. They voted out Ryan, and Ryan was a vote out that was not going to be, there was going to be no backlash for it. Whereas Cassidy voting out, Carla could have, they could have had a much bigger target on their back sooner by voting out Cassidy. So I think this is everything happens, in my opinion, because of Carla, right? Sammy wants to work with Carla, wants to be Carla's number one. So they vote out James. Jesse and Cody don't want to, piss off Carla, so they keep Cassidy in the game. And now Carla still has numbers around her. And look, I mean, she's playing such an impressive social game. It really is just unbelievable. Like, I think everything in the end goes back to Carla. I'm just curious, are we ever going to hit a point where people like realize how good of a game Carla's playing? Like, I literally, like, I was joking around with my brother earlier in the season. And, I thought the season got off to a slow start in the fact that, like, it didn't really look like, other than Carla, there were that many, like, great players. And now it's obviously, like, picking up a lot. And I legitimately joked around with my brother, and I was like, yeah, what if Carla just Kim Spradlins this entire thing? And, like, honestly, we're like, not too far away from that happening. Like, I was completely joking when I said that at the beginning of the season. Like, there's legit Kim Spradlin stuff happening, in the sense that, like, everybody is coming to her for every single thing, and it's completely crazy. Ultimately, I don't think Jesse and Cody are going to let that happen, but up to this point, it's been extremely impressive, and I don't think people know about her idol still.
Yeah, and again, I think she's still in a really good spot, and there's still time. I mean, I think Omer and a couple other people that have led their season kind of got exposed around the final 6 anyway. So there's still time, but I think she's still positioned pretty well. Her name hasn't really come up at all, and I don't think she has a lot of loose threads left. I think since we moved on to group 2, I think with Cody and Jesse, I feel like their stock has kind of gone down a bit, honestly. I don't think it was the right move to vote out Ryan, just because, again, they had the benefit of seeing the first tribal, and once James left, I feel like they were like, okay, well, if James left, they technically said to us, oh, well, Cassidy should go, because then at that point, Carla's already lost a number. We can kind of further get her on our side if we take off her other ally, Cassidy, and instead they vote out Ryan. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe I was just so convinced that Ryan was going to be like the final 3 goat, or Ryan was going to get dragged to the end. I just feel like Ryan, as they said in the show, he's a physical threat, which I don't agree with in the types of challenges that we have at this point in the game. It's more endurance, more balance, more puzzles. And I feel like Ryan, his strengths have already kind of like come and gone in that way. But he's clearly just not a threat whatsoever. And I feel bad about the show giving him like a dodo edit. But if you recall, he's having a conversation, Ryan, with Gabler, and Ryan's like, all right, so who's on the block tonight? It's probably Cassidy. Oh, but maybe we can vote out Cody. And Gabler's like, well, he has immunity. We can't vote for him. And Ryan's like, oh, yeah, right. So it's like Ryan clearly is not making any moves anytime soon. So I feel like, A, it was a bad move for Jesse and Cody to take out Ryan over Cassidy here. And B, and I don't want to read too much into the preview, I really think Cody, while he had the right idea to try to bring in Gabler into a guy's alliance to kind of lock him up, was a good idea. The problem is that it's Gabler. I really think, Dylan, this is going to backfire on Cody and Jesse. I really do.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering Right, like, is Gabler for real in that sense, or is he, or as soon as they, go back as one tribe, is he gonna go running up to Owen and tell Owen everything that's going on? Or is Owen gonna just join them, and are they gonna become a strong four, right? Owen's kind of still a free agent right now.
I just think Gabler, and first of all, we've seen nothing yet, because obviously he turned on Ellie and Janine because they kind of threw him under the bus with, the idol rules and going through his bag. So he was loyal to Ellie until Ellie kind of made the first strike in a way. As of right now, Cody and Jesse haven't really gone against Gabler yet. So Gabler, when he's like doing like the whole arm, I can't do it by myself, like the whole like arm handshake, like I want to work with you. Cody hasn't given him any reason to distrust him yet. So I think in the moment, Gabler wants to go to the end with Cody and Jesse. My fear is that Gabler, A, has loose lips, so he'll just blab about something, or B, if at any point somebody reveals to Gabler, hey, did Cody tell you he has an idol? Or hey, did Cody tell you this? And Gabler feels even a little bit slighted, he's going to immediately be like, Cody and Jesse are running the whole thing. They came to me to try to do this. They wanted to do this. So that's why I feel like if it was anybody but Gabler, I think Cody trying to bring someone else into the fold was a good idea. I just feel like this is going to backfire on them. Now, the silver lining, like you mentioned, is that they have two idols. They have Cody's idol, which Jesse somehow still is holding on to, and then Jesse also has Janine's idol. So they still have two tools they can try to leverage, possibly.
Yeah, and right. So going back to, I think everything you said is correct, but like I still think it's undecided, obviously, whether or not voting out Ryan was the correct move or not, right? A lot of people, we all thought that voting out Dwight was the wrong move, and then all of a sudden Jesse shows the idol, and we're like, maybe it was the right move, right? And so far it looks good for them, the Dwight move. That being said, this was a little bit different. You could have gotten out a bigger threat, and you could have stripped Carla of another ally, and you didn't. I'm trying to think here from Jesse's perspective, right? Because it seems like, and I want to give Cody complete credit, but they're making it seem like Jesse is more of the mastermind behind it, right? If I'm Jesse right now, right, and we've seen the game that has been won in 41 and 42, it's like the person who is not exactly seen as the big threat is the person who ends up prevailing in the end. They haven't seen 42, but you get what I mean, right? I'm talking about like, from what we've seen, we saw 41 and 42, and the person who managed their threat level completely and then struck at the right time was the person who ended up winning the game.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse is doing a really good job of keeping his threat level low, at least for now, while also keeping shields in the game that are probably going to be targeted before him. So far in the merge, we have not seen Jesse's name thrown out once. Okay, which is impressive. He has an idol, okay, that nobody knows about. Cody has an idol. Everyone knows Cody has the idol. So in my opinion, I almost feel like that Cody may be targeted before Jesse just because of that. So I think that he's kind of keeping Cody, and Cody may be a shield for him. Cody's winning immunities. Cody is, obviously he's number one. And I think Cody's ultimately going to be a big target. He's a likable guy. Everyone likes the guy. I think that it is very possible that Cody is targeted before Jesse is. Okay. Yeah. I also think that, again, had they made the move on Cassidy, that kind of goes against what his strategy has been, because you're eliminating a big threat and you're annoying another big threat, in the sense that everyone may kind of turn the spotlight on you for the move that happens. So I think that for the game he's trying to play, it actually does make sense to vote out Ryan. Now, obviously, we're going to have to see the game he plays the rest of the time, because that'll dictate whether this was the right move. If he all of a sudden just tries to go make big moves and stuff, then yeah, Cassidy was probably just the right move. But if he continues to play the game he's playing, which I think he will, and goes completely low key, then I think it was the right move to vote out Ryan in the end. That's kind of my take from all this, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that we don't know yet what's going to happen with the idols, if both of them get played because Jesse and Cody really feel in the hot seat, or if only one of them gets played, or maybe they get completely blindsided. I think you can make an argument either way, because you could argue that if the group goes against them, Jesse would be getting votes because he's maybe seen more as a threat possibly, and also because they know Cody is an idol. Maybe it's quote unquote like safer to go after Jesse because Cody has the idol. On the other hand, you could say, well, maybe Jesse's the bigger threat, so let's vote out Cody to weaken Jesse, which would be ironic because they voted out Dwight to weaken Noelle, so that'd be pretty ironic. But maybe they want to take out Cody as a physical threat, and it also weakens Jesse. But I guess we'll have to see, honestly. I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm really curious when the groups reconvene if Carla is going. Well, first of all, Jesse and Cody might go to Carla and say, hey, what happened? How did James go? Were you in on it? Because technically it could have been a 3-2 vote where Carla was left out. Now, I'm going to be curious if, and we'll talk about something else here in a second, if Carla owns up to like, oh, yeah, no, I was in on it and I voted out James because of this. I'm really interested to see what they say there. And I still think keeping Cassidy in the game gives Carla more power. Like, especially if Carla doesn't want to go with Cody and Jesse. I feel like Sammy's on her side. Cassidy's more on her side. I feel like if there's a civil war between Carla and the guys, I feel like they gave her more leverage.
Yeah, I think there's a good point. It's all going to depend where the numbers lie, and I think we're pretty guaranteed to get a strong winner, in my opinion, at this point, because well,
if Gabler pulls Dylan, I'm going to clip this, and if Gabler pulls out the win here, I'm going to be very upset with you.
This is assuming that doesn't happen, right? I assume that one of the top people that we have mentioned are going to win. Just because at this point, we're final 8, and like one of those people are going to get to the final 3, and I think that at that point, right, they pretty much are going to have it locked up. And I think that Cassidy is someone who's also interesting to look at here because she stays in the game. People keep saying how she's playing a great strategic game, and like, but she's also playing a quiet game, right? So I know she's had her name thrown out, but once assuming there is some eventual line drawn in the sands between Carla and Cassidy and Jesse and Cody, like, I almost feel like once Carla and Jesse and Cody start going after each other, Cassidy kind of just may skate through, right? And that was her original gameplay. So I think she's interesting. I also think there is a chance that next week, Carla, Jesse, and Cody are all on the same side of the vote, and they take one of the easier votes out and vote out Owen or Noelle.
Possibly.
I want to know real quick before we go over some of the other things that happened in the episode. I want to know what you think Sammy's plan is. Like, what is Sammy's grand plan? Because he is really, really trying hard to play with Carla. Do you think he realized that Carla had like all the power in the game and he's really just trying to get there in terms of being her number one? Like, what do you think his goal is right now? Like, what do you think if you're Sammy, put yourself in Sammy's shoes, what's your path to the end of the game?
I mean, Sammy is right now, I feel like, I have one example, but I feel like this isn't the best comparison. So maybe I'll think of a better one. He's kind of like in that Tony and Wu spot where he's being the pendulum and he kind of like wants to swing back and forth. Like, it's the hardest thing you can do in Survivor or any of these reality games is like play the middle. Because if you play the middle and you get caught, you're basically dead. You either get voted out or people don't give you respect at the end of the game. So Sammy's playing the hardest game to play, and I think he's doing a pretty good job at it. So he was in the 7 because Sammy so far has voted correctly every time. I think Sammy wants to keep voting correctly in the numbers. And I think when he votes with the 7, he does it because he wants to be part of the majority group. But then when he realizes, okay, wait a second, I'm in the 7, so I'm good if we stick to 7. But when we get there, I'm in the bottom because the Cocos have each other, the Vessies have each other, and then I'm on the outs. So that's where he swung back to now take out James in this case. So I think the only thing I can really pin down for Sammy's game is that he wants to work with Carla. I feel like he still doesn't want to take out Owen because I feel like he doesn't see Owen as that big of a threat. And I feel like with Carla, maybe he recognizes that people like her, but he has no idea about her idol. And I don't know if he realizes how lethal she can be. So I guess we'll have to see, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know whether he thinks that like he wants to ride with Carla until like final 5 and then vote her out, or he thinks he could beat Carla in the end. Like, I don't like, maybe his perspective on Carla is not what our perspective on Carla is. Like, I'm a little bit confused by that. To me, it's very hard. I think Sammy's playing a really good game, and yet I have trouble envisioning a path for him to get to the end and win, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's
Like
fair.
I feel like if he makes any huge move, it's going to come with a consequence of him getting voted out the next tribal. So it's almost like I have a hard time, envisioning him getting to the end where he is with people that he could completely say he played the right game, better game. Then I think that's going to be tough for him. So we'll see what happens. Anything else you want to talk about before we talk about some of the other interesting things that happened in this episode?
So I think with group one, while we're talking about Sammy, I feel like he also got a little lucky here. Now, obviously, I think he's done a great job. I don't want to take anything away from Sammy's game. I'm not saying that he's the best player of the season right now, but I think he has done a great job. I think he's lucky because he is working with someone like Carla, who is a gamer, and she's somebody who will consider different options. Like Carla's not somebody who goes into the game, gets a number one like James, and says, "Oh, I'm never turning on that person." I think he's lucky that Carla considers different options because Dylan, I saw Wendell tweeted this. I could see a world where Sammy goes to Carla and says, "Hey, how about we take out your number one ally?" She goes to James and says, "Guess what Sammy just said?" And then the vote flips on Sammy. And I didn't think Sammy was in danger last night. However, I feel like it could have possibly flipped to Sammy, honestly, just if Carla wanted James there and she was not going to budge on it, Sammy could have found himself in some trouble. So while I think that he made the right choice in terms of like trying to pull her in and not, because if you leave her out of the vote, she may go run back to Jesse and Cody, and then Sammy might be in the hot seat next week. So that's why I think to play the middle, he wanted to pull her back in there. I'm just saying I think it could have actually went poorly for him, possibly.
Yeah, I thought he was about to get himself voted out for a second, right? We've seen that happen so many times. when he mentions it to her voting out James, I was like, oh my God. I was like, how could he make that mistake, right? After it seems like everything he had done was so calculated, and then all of a sudden, like, it worked, right? So I feel like there's like some kind of disconnect between how close Carla and Sammy actually are. They're probably more close than we have been let on, right? So I think that's probably the disconnect between what we're seeing and what actually is going on.
I also want to give credit to Noelle, unless you wanted to go through the episode in more detail, because I feel like we haven't touched a lot on Noelle yet, and I feel
we need to do that as well. Honestly, like we've already gone over so much stuff in the episodes, so I mean, we could definitely talk about Noelle, and then we'll move a little bit to like some of the stuff that happened in the beginning of the episode. But yeah, let's talk about Noelle right now.
So I have to give her a lot of credit because I feel like Noelle, what have we said about her so far? We've said that she's obviously a beast in challenges. We've said that people seem to like her socially, but people have already seen her as a threat because her name came up at the Dwight vote, and it could have been her if Cody didn't say, "Nah, I kind of trust Dwight less. Let's vote Dwight out." So Noelle could have actually gone home already at this point. So she's playing a good game, but I think but she's been an underdog, and unlike Jesse or Carla, or I guess you could say Sammy, people have already started to put her name out there. She's not completely like void of any targets right now. But I have to give her credits. Noelle, I feel like was, if not the star, she was one of the biggest players this episode, because not only did she use the vote steal, she used the vote steal, I think, both, to use a sports metaphor, like offensively and defensively. Obviously, offensively, she takes James out, and that's pretty obvious. In essence, she didn't even really need it because she had the votes with Carla. So even if Carla didn't vote with them, she had the votes. And with Carla, they had the votes, so she didn't even need the steal a vote. Here's why I think people are saying it was a really great move for her to use it, because she used it also defensively. Because James could have done two things. James could have either played a shot in the dark if he felt scared, or James could have said like, okay, Noelle just told me she has knowledge is power. I'm going to say, hey, Noelle, give me your knowledge is power. I'm sorry, Noelle has steal a vote. Give me your steal a vote. But by her going to him ahead of time and saying, hey, Owen's gone, right? Yeah, Owen's gone for sure. Yeah, I want Owen gone. How about I take his vote tonight? So in case anything fluky happens, he's gone no matter what. And James is like, oh, I love that. So by basically telling James, like, look, I'm going to steal Owen's vote, I think she ensures he's not going to use the shot in the dark, and he's not going to steal her, steal her vote steal.
Yeah, it was a great move. She read James really, really well that he would take the bait there, right? Because if Noelle does not sell that well, it could go terribly wrong for her, right? She could end up getting the steal a vote stolen, and then Owen ends up going home, right? She played it so perfectly, right? James was not even a little bit worried about what was going to happen, and you saw it by his reaction. He was way more confident in what was going to happen in this vote than he was seemingly in the other votes before this, where he, got his name written down and was like flipping out while the votes were getting read. Here, he did not expect it at all. And I think all the credit goes to Noel in being really creative in using the steal vote. I don't think we've seen that really done before, right? Have we seen it done have we seen a steal vote used kind of as like a bargaining tool? Like, I'm not really sure if we've seen that before. It was very creative, and I did not expect that. And it was impressively done.
I feel like the vote steal, and I guess you could argue the extra vote too, but I would need to go back in history. I feel like it didn't work for a long time because obviously the first time we saw it was with Stephen Fishback and it didn't work out. And then we also saw, I think, Dan and Worlds Apart get the extra vote and that didn't work out. So usually these advantages don't usually get their intended target out. Now, I will give Sarah Lucina credit because Sarah not only used an extra vote in Game Changers to take out Michaela, but she also uses the steal a vote to get out Tyson, I think, for the second time in Winners at War, basically. So I think we have seen the vote steal used effectively before. I would need to think if this is like the best use of it, or if we've seen other instances similar to it, like where you said it's used as like a bargaining chip. But I didn't notice this in the episode, but somebody pointed it out to me on Twitter, and I actually went back and I watched the tribal clip. So Noelle actually cuts Jeff off, and she's actually, when Jeff's like, all right, I think and she says it's time to vote, right? And then she immediately pulls out the advantage. People were wondering, like, because they saw 41, people are wondering if she realizes, okay, if James starts talking and says, I have knowledge is power, I can't stop him from taking my advantage. In terms of like order of operations, like a math problem, I think people were guessing, was she trying to just get her steal vote out right away? So that way, because once she uses the steal vote, James can no longer take it from her. So I think to ensure that he couldn't do it, I think that's why she cuts Jeff off and she's like, hey, time to vote, right? And then she pulls it out. People were thinking that way she makes sure James doesn't pull a fast one and takes her thing.
Yeah, I believe that's the correct interpretation, right? So I think she purposely did that so that there was zero chance that the knowledge of power was being used against her. Really smart move. And just another reason why telling people about knowledge of powers is a terrible idea, right?
I'm curious. Do you think we see it again? There's no shot they bring it back again
this season, or like?
Oh no, sorry. Do you think they bring it back this season? There's no shots.
If it's brought back this season, that would be an abomination. It will not be brought back this season.
We're at the final.
There's no way. There's no way.
We're at the final 8. I can't imagine it comes back again.
There's no way. There's no way. I do. Unfortunately, I do think we see it again in 44.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we see it again this season. I'm seeing people like, and Survivor may agree with this, even though I think it's the wrong perspective to have. I saw some people on Reddit arguing that they think that the knowledge of power is good, even though it's not being used correctly. It's good to have out there because it changes how people operate. In a sense that like you always have to keep in mind that somebody, if you know somebody has it, you have to like play around it, which is what they did. And like it could create better gameplay. I don't agree with that at all, but like Survivor could see it in that sense. I'm hoping that it doesn't work in 44 and we never see it again. But yeah, it's like, I can't imagine being out there and just having the stress that your advantage is in trouble the entire time. Like that had to have hurt James in the fact that he went home at final 10 instead of like final 7 or 6 or whatever, right? Like to me, if I have an advantage and I know James has knowledge as power, he's getting out of there as soon as possible. I cannot risk that this late in the game.
The only way I want it to come back this season is if Carla finds it and just chucks it in the ocean. That's the only way that I want it to come back, because I think you're unfortunately right that they're going to keep bringing it back until it works once. And I think they may bring it back in 44 one more time, because 41 to 44 have all been like, in essence, like carbon copies of each other. I think we might see it again next season if it hasn't worked out yet. But then I feel like after that, they got to stop at this point.
Yeah, I agree. One more thing I wanted to talk about at the beginning of the episode. I think we pretty much covered everything else. And you wrote this here in our notes for the episode to go over. Last week, there were 2 votes on Ryan. Yeah. One of them was Cassidy, and the other was Janine. Owen ends up voting for Janine, so he ended up voting the right way. But the entire episode, Owen was acting like he screwed up the vote, right?
Well,
I'm right. So here's what I was gonna say. I'm wondering if James knew. Did James know that he voted Janine correctly, or did James think that Cassidy voted Janine and Owen voted Ryan? Was that clarified?
So a couple things, and this is maybe why I need to go back and rewatch that part of the episode. And I think it was a bit confusing. All we know for sure, I think, is that right before Tribal, like 5 minutes before, Gabler goes up to Owen and says, "Hey, it's Janine." That's what I'm hearing. And then Owen kind of catches on and he votes Janine. But right before that, like 10 minutes before Tribal, he goes to James and says, "Hey, where are we voting?" And James says, "Oh, you're good. Vote Ryan out." And Owen, to Gabler's credit, Owen votes the right way. Now, I thought, like you said, I thought at first Owen was kind of owning up to it, like, "No, I vote like no, I was the one who voted out like Ryan. I was that extra vote, and you lied to me, and that's proof of why you can't be trusted, James, because you say I wrote your name down twice, but you told me the wrong name, and I voted the wrong name." But then I thought later in the episode, I could have sworn he said, like, to Sam, okay, maybe it's two different things. Maybe he told James one thing, and maybe he told Sammy something else. Because I could have sworn he said to Sammy, "I voted out Janine with you guys because Gabler told me that's where we were voting." So again, I'm a bit confused as well whether everybody knows where Owen voted or if some people think he voted one way, but other people know he voted the other way.
I mean, maybe it was just like everyone knows where the votes went, but like Owen was still mad that James told him the wrong thing.
But guess what else? There was this, I don't know if you saw, there was a secret scene this week.
I did not see it.
And it showed Cassidy's perspective. And this is why I can't stand how, if you want to have secret scenes, fine. I know we all want 1.5 hour episodes because we need to fit more in, but if they can't do it because of programming, fine. But then you got to figure out where to cut other stuff out, because in the secret scene, Cassidy obviously reveals that like she was the one who voted out Ryan, and she was not left out of the plan. She was in on the plan, but she doesn't own up to it. She acts in the secret scene like she was also with the group to vote out Janine. So I guess before the split tribe, in case Owen was going to be the next easy vote, she keeps playing it up like, yeah, it must have been Owen. Owen must have wrote your name down, Ryan. I didn't write your name down. I think Owen should go next, maybe. So I wish we saw that, because that would have given us more like backstory or like more information that Cassidy was in on the plan. She didn't get left out. She was making a statement because she doesn't like Ryan, and she was really kind of hamming it up that Owen voted the wrong way. And again, this goes back to what we were just saying, where now I'm trying to think about, does everybody know that Owen voted the wrong way, or did Owen tell one thing to James but tell Sammy the truth? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going around here. I do think ultimately, like, to talk about just some other stuff that we didn't really talk about, the Owen James like rivalry was amazing, right? That's something that we haven't had in like a long time, right? It felt like it was like prime, like, you know, like it felt like it was very Survivor, if that makes sense. Like I was listening to a podcast last night that was kind of talking about how it's like nice to it's a breath of fresh air for not everyone to be like all like loving each other, and like actually like people like don't like each other on the cast, or at least it seems that way. Like it was nice to have a rivalry. Like it felt like a Dom Chris Noble thing, or you know, or something.
It was dramatic. It was fun. I had fun seeing it. I can't remember the last time we had a blow up like that in front of everybody, because I feel like when it comes to these blow ups or these arguments, it happens between two people by themselves, and then at Tribal, like, it gets rehashed, like this is what went down, but you never see the conflict in front of everybody. Like obviously when Ellie and Gabler get into their arguments, it's in the woods by themselves, but then everyone hears about it later. Same thing where, you know, Dom and Chris get into their arguments, but then people hear about it like later. Like, you know, Rick Devens and War Dog fall, but like I don't think we've seen like a big tribe like argument between two people in front of everybody. And people obviously will correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Obviously, I think back to like Sandra and Johnny Fairplay. I think back to when Tony and Cass started arguing, and Kakian and Tony's like talking llama in front of everybody with Cass at camp. I'm trying to think if there's a more recent example. Like I think Mike Holloway fought with Rodney in front of everybody. But basically, like, to your point, it happens very, very rarely where you get a big blow up between two people in front of everyone else, which technically Owen and James, they started arguing separately and then it got brought back into camp. So
Yeah, that was it was hilarious. I loved watching it.
Also, I have one more question for you on that. Because people were debating this. Who do you think either was in the wrong, or who do you think came away looking better? Because I feel like they both didn't come across looking great. Because on one hand, James was being a little condescending, where he's like, "No, Owen, you voted the right way because you vote how I told you to vote." Like, it was a little grating from James. But on the other hand, James has a point that Owen wrote his name down twice already, and Owen didn't even want to like talk to James. So I feel like they both didn't come off looking great.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think that James was in the wrong for being condescending, and Owen was in the wrong for sometimes in Survivor, you have to just table your emotions, right? Like sometimes in Survivor, you have to say, all right, I really don't like this guy. And I can't get along with him right now, but for the betterment of my game, I need to like be quiet now. And I think
Mhm.
that Owen was unable to do that in this situation. Maybe it won't affect his game, and maybe he didn't care because he was able to get James out anyway. But like it could, I mean, it could have been an issue for him. Um, yeah, I think again that's such a big part of Survivor, right? You know, you are not going to like everybody on the island. You are not going to like everybody on your tribe. Are you able to put that, keep that inside and not show that outwardly, uh, in order to make better gameplay? So I think, yeah, in a way, both of them did not look great.
Yeah, and again, I can't blame Owen for being upset with how James was kind of acting with it. But Owen did write his name down twice, and when James tried to talk to him, Owen was like, "I'm not going to talk to you about it." Which, again, I understand why Owen's upset, because you can't trust anything James tells you at this point. But you can at least just have especially now we're at the jury phase, just have a conversation with him. Don't like go pout, or don't just sit off to the side and not have that discussion. And again, like I referenced at the start of the podcast, no, I think Noelle was just loving the conflict with her papaya. And I think even Carla was like, "Ooh, like there's a lot of drama here." So
Look, anytime that there's drama, like you said, anytime that there's drama between two people that are not including you, it means that it's a better thing for you in the short term. So I think that, yeah, there was a reason for them to be loving it.
because again, I think in Survivor, what it always comes down to, especially in the early game, like we always say, don't give people a reason to vote you out, because people, especially early on, or even just even if there's a vote where it's very confusing, sometimes people will just look for the simplest explanation, kind of like Occam's razor. It's like people will always go for the most simple explanation, and if people give you a reason to vote them out, that's not a great thing. So if you are not in the conflict, you want that to continue, so it's one of their names being brought up down the road.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to get to questions
Sure.
now?
Yeah.
Sure, let's get to questions. Let's see if we have anything in the chat. If you're watching live, thank you. Be sure to like, subscribe if you haven't already. Really helps us out. If you have any questions, drop them in and we will answer them. All right, so okay, so we have a question from Jay here. He says, hold on. Okay, he says, oh, wait. Okay, hold on. There's a second version of this question that I'm going to put up instead. Okay, he says,
Sure.
from Jay, but wouldn't it have made more sense for Cody and Jesse to vote out Gabler instead of Casa Ryan to not upset Carla, since Gabler wasn't in the 7? I think, honestly, like, I know that Ryan is from the original. Like, see, you're basically, Jay is saying, like, the argument I made before is that they kept Cass because they didn't want to upset Carla. So Jay is asking, well, then wouldn't it made sense to just get rid of Gabler? I think that they think that Gabler's a number for them, one.
Yeah.
And I also think that at this point, everyone kind of knows Ryan is just the guy who fishes, and I don't think it's a big loss either way to vote him out, even though he's on a Coco tribe. So I don't think that voting Ryan out over Gabler per se would upset Carla at all, personally.
Yeah, for some reason, I guess I just felt like Gabler was never in danger. I don't know why. I mean, granted, when we got back to camp, we saw that it was going to be either between Ryan or Cassidy. But even when I saw the divisions, I thought to myself, there's no way this goes on Gabler. I feel like either Ryan goes, Cassidy goes, or maybe somehow it flips on Jesse or Cody. I just couldn't see a scenario where Gabler went, just because I don't think people saw him as a threat. And I think with the 7, like, and maybe this is why we feel like the numbers are a bit confusing, Dylan, and it's not clear who's on what side, is that now that Janine is gone, I feel like the game kind of reopened up in some ways because people at the fake merge or in the merge voted out Ellie. And then people that were kind of like with Ellie was kind of like some of the Baka people and some of the Vessi people. So they vote out Dwight, Tawik and Noelle. And then Janine was close to Dwight and Janine was close to Ellie. I feel like once that you got that group out, the only people that were left on the bottom was Owen. And you could maybe argue Noelle also, but mainly Owen. I feel like Gabler was never really seen as like part of that group. Gabler was kind of just seen as like a free agent doing his own thing. And people were like, if Gabler's with us, fine. If he's not, we don't really care. So I feel like, I think it still would have made the most sense about Cassidy instead of Ryan. I just don't think Ryan's a threat at all. But I feel like we saw in the episode, they wanted to pull in Gabler as a number for them. And listen, if they vote out Cassidy, I'm not saying Gabler and Ryan are dumb, but if they vote out Cassidy and they say, hey, let's go 4 bros to the end. It'll be us 4. We'll pull in Sammy if we want. We'll just do 4 guys. Let's just do that. And you could see a scenario where Ryan and Gabler go, ooh, that sounds really cool. Let's do that, all guys. So I feel like that to me made the most sense. But yeah, I didn't think Gabler was going to be in danger.
All right, we got another question here from Green Bay Packer fan 14. He says there haven't been any big idol moves so far, but there's still a lot out there. So yes, there's 3 idols with 8 people left. Do you expect a more low-key finish with idols, or is there potential for another advantage get-in? I'm going to say the odds are that there's not going to be an advantage get-in. I think the odds are that, look, there's still, there's 8 left. So there's the 8 tribal council. There's the final 7 tribal council. There's the final 6 tribal council and final 5 tribal council. That's 4 more tribal councils for 3 idols to be used. Plus, if let's just say 2 are used next week or 1 is used next week and 1's used next week, I could easily see another one being thrown back in because that's what they do lately. So I'm going to say that just by the odds of there being 4 more tribals that you could play it and 3 idols out there, maybe a 4th that comes in after a few are gone, I'm going to say no, we don't get an advantage get in. Also, we're getting to the point where like people should really start to consider using idols, and somebody's going to try to make a big move, I would think. So I'm going to say no advantage get in, but of course there's, I guess, potential for it.
I just don't think, again, people can always correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember everything, but I feel like it's going to be a low-key finish. I feel like in this new era, idols just don't, I mean, maybe it's because people are talking a lot, people are getting blindsided with them. Maybe it's due to knowledge is power. We haven't seen in the new era, Dylan, a single successful idol play because in 41, I don't think any idol plays happened or people went home with them. In 42, the only time we saw idols like kind of utilize a tribal was where the whole thing with Tori, where Drea and Marianne played their idols before the votes were even cast. So that was a unique scenario. So that didn't even matter really. And then I think when Lindsay went home, I think Lindsay wanted Mike to use his idol on her, or maybe he wanted him to give her the necklace. But in 41 and 42, I don't think we've seen a single idol played or even played correctly. So I feel like at this point, even though Carla and Jesse have them, and Cody has them as well, I still don't feel like it's going to be an advantage yet. And I still feel like it's going to be a low-key finish, which either means somebody goes home with it in their pocket again, like one of Carla, Jesse, or Cody, or maybe we see one tribal where one gets played. But I don't know. I feel like in the new era, we're so used to seeing in like the 20s and 30s, like big idol plays, like blank does not count. This does not count. We haven't seen that in 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens, right? There could definitely be big moves made. It's just like you don't want to make the big move just to make the big move, right? You got to do it smart. So Jesse's not going to go and play his idol for no reason if he doesn't have to. He's saving it for in case he needs it big. So look, I think that where you could start to see the idols come into big handy is if we did see the coming attractions, and who knows if this means anything, but Gabler was telling Carlo, like, just so you know, Jesse and Cody are running the whole thing, and like we're gonna have to deal with that. Which is interesting. So if everybody ends up going against Jesse and Cody, then yeah, the idols are gonna come into play soon. But in terms of advantage get in, no, I don't see it.
Yeah, and again, I don't take a lot of stock into the preview. And it's funny. Usually, I try not to look too much into it because I don't want to be spoiled, and I also don't want to read too much into the edits. And like I said, this season, I feel like I've kind of forgotten about most of the previews, but for some reason, last night stuck with me. I feel like a lot of names got brought up. Like I feel like in the 30 seconds that you see in the preview, or actually may even be like 20 seconds, we see like Sammy say like Noel's got to go. Noel's a threat. Noel's like Sammy. He's playing way too hard. Sammy's got to go. And then that's at the end. That's where you see Gabler go to Carla and say Jesse and Cody are running the whole thing. So a lot of names are getting thrown out next week. I feel like so that's Jesse and Cody's names get thrown out possibly. Noel and Sammy's names get thrown out possibly. Owen's always on the chopping block. Cassidy's been on the chopping block. The only person's name who hasn't been really like brought up again is Carla. So again, that's a testament to how good she's doing so far. But even though I feel like you can go into next episode thinking Cody and Jesse are in trouble, the whole Gabler thing's going to bite them in the butt, you could also argue they also threw out there like Sammy might be in danger, Noel might be in danger. So
I kind of feel like we're at the point of the game, and I didn't mention this in the entire podcast. I kind of feel like we're at the point of the game where somebody like Owen may just skate by for the rest of the time because I don't think anyone. We're at the point where like he's been on the chopping block for so long to the point where like he has done nothing in the game that's worth fearing, right? So we're at the point where like, all right, there are much bigger fish to fry than Owen. Obviously Owen could still make a huge move that would all of a sudden boost him right up at the top into contention. But right now we haven't seen that. So I think there's a decent chance that next week Owen could just skate by because his name, like you're at the point where you're thinking to yourself, all right, well, like we tried to get at Owen a bunch of times and it just hasn't worked. And now like there's bigger fish to fry. Like we got to start getting out the threats. We're at final 8. So I think there's a chance that Owen could just skate by, but yeah.
If Owen, and I think we have one more question from Jay, but I think if Owen makes it to the end, I mean, people keep saying like, oh, Owen has nothing on his resume, but like, it's not always about resume. It's also about, relationships. I think Owen, people, even though other than James, I think people still like Owen. And I also feel like people like the underdog. And if Owen gets there, he has such a good underdog story. Kind of like we said, if Janine had a pretty rough stretch. If Janine could have made it to the end after the whole Ellie and Dwight thing, I could see a scenario where Janine could have won because of her underdog status. So if you're correct and Owen starts to skate by because people start taking big swings at each other, if Owen makes it to the end with Gabler and Cassidy, or if people don't respect Sammy, then Owen could easily win. Yeah.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that we're still at the final 8. A big move could still be made. At this point of last season, no one thought Marianne was winning, and then she made her big move. So,
again, yeah, I mean, we can get back into the whole thing about Erica and Marianne and when we thought they were going to win. I think we all knew once she took out Omer, we had a feeling she was going to win. Erica, we probably didn't know until like in the middle of the finale, essentially. But I mean, yeah, again, like I said, there's in the new era, there hasn't been a clear front runner left in the finale other than when Marianne took out Omer. And I think that's why it's a much more chaotic, even playing field in some ways.
Yep. All right. Last question here. Jay wants to know, do you guys think they'll put Knowledge is Power in the 44 premiere in the first Advantage Summit of the season, similar to Gabler's Idol, and the Knowledge is Power will be good for one of the next 3 tribals? So that's actually interesting, right? If they put an expiration date on Knowledge is Power, then it's more likely to be used correctly.
Yeah.
So I think that is an interesting point and something that I have not thought of. But look, I hope it's just gone after 44. But they seem to absolutely love this thing. So who knows?
I feel like it'll, especially if it's done after the season, because now it's gotten out twice. I can't see how they bring it back a third time. I have a feeling they'll try one more time in 44, and if it doesn't work, then they're just gonna be done with it. Honestly, now I'm not gonna say anything, but I know from like some of the Redmond Inside Survivor stuff, I know what one of the twists next season is, so I won't say anything. But I would be curious to see if they do bring Knowledge is Power back. Do they, like you said, put an expiration shot clock on it and say, all right, it hasn't worked out. You're going to use it and you're going to use it within 3 episodes and don't tell anybody. I wonder if maybe then it'll work. Because again, the problem with Knowledge is Power again is that like each time it's because somebody blabbed. It's not like somebody says, okay, like it's good for the next 3 tribals. I don't know who has what. John, do you have an idol and it just happens to fail because you didn't know who had what? It's failed all 4 times because people talked about it. So I'm curious to know what happens if someone just doesn't talk about it. It probably works.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, that is an interesting question by Jay for sure. And then one more actually. He wants to know, do we think that there'll be a twist at the final 7 or 6, just like they had do or die at final 7 and 41 and 42?
So I know the answer to this, but I'm not gonna say if you don't want me to say. So
yeah. As somebody who doesn't know, I'm gonna say there will probably be something. But I don't know what it is, and if Ryan knows, then yeah, he should. Yeah, so you could. I say you should just. People probably don't want to know. So I know that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, because again, I don't know how many people follow either the Dalton Ross articles or the Redmond Survivor articles, so I won't mention it. But I mean, so far this season, other than them like tweaking like the hourglass and tweaking other things, I mean, we've seen 41, 42, and 43 be, again, copies of each other. I mean, people can probably go back and I saw someone make a chart actually, and they said what happened at 11, at 10, at 9. So because it's been very similar, we know what's going to happen unless Jeff looked at a twist in between seasons and said, okay, well, we're going to make a change now, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. I'm gonna guess it's not do or die, but there is gonna be a twist of some sort. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. And we will be back on Thursday. Oh no, we won't be back on Thursday of next week because it is Thanksgiving. So we will keep you updated on the time of next week's podcast. But yeah. We'll keep you updated. We'll, just follow our Twitter, and you'll be able to see everything there. At Soul Survivor Pod, the link is in the bio. But yeah, we're done.
Yeah, Dylan. I mean, can you believe that we only have basically like 3-4 more weeks of Survivor 43, and then we're done? It always goes so fast.
Then they announced, I believe that the premiere is late again. It's not till like March 1st or something.
March 1st, yeah.
So it used to be in February, but I guess we're in March now. So. Survivor 44 will premiere in March, and then I'm very curious to see what stuff starts to come out around then, because I have a feeling that we are going to see some returning players in either 44 or 45 or 46. So curious to see what info comes out there.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, like Dylan said, check out our social media next week, since it is Thanksgiving, to figure out when we are recording. But other than that, nothing else for you. Happy holidays, and grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.